All right, so welcome back to another deep dive with us. Today we're going to be tackling something that I think a lot of you have asked for, and that is slang.
Ooh.
Specifically English slang, right?
Yeah.
I mean, even for people who speak English pretty well, sometimes slang can be really tricky. Now it is for me.
Yeah.
So we're going to be looking at a really cool podcast episode called How to Use English Slang Like a Native Speaker. It's from the Simple Pod, hosted by Marco and Erica.
Yeah, I love that podcast.
Yeah, they do a great job. I think what's so interesting about slang is that it changes so quickly.
It really does.
Right? Like what was cool 10 years ago probably sounds really outdated now.
You definitely sound like a fossil if you were using slang from 10 years ago.
Totally. And I think that's another thing that's tricky about slang is it's so regional.
Mm-hmm.
Like even within English. What's popular in the UK versus Australia or even within the US.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's almost like its own language sometimes.
Right. So have you ever run into any slang that just left you completely confused?
Well, just recently I was talking to one of my younger cousins, and she was telling me about this party, and she was like, it was so bussin'.
Bussin'?
Bussin'. And
What is bussin'?
I had no idea. So I didn't want to embarrass myself and ask, well, what does bussin' mean? So I just kind of nodded along and pretended like I knew what she was talking about.
Yeah, I've definitely done that before too.
And then later I had to go look it up, because I was so curious. And apparently it means really good or really fun.
Oh, okay.
But, I had no idea.
So, Marco and Erica in this podcast, they start off by just, defining what slang is. And they say it's basically informal language that people use in casual conversations.
Yeah.
Which makes sense.
Yeah, it's just like a more relaxed way of speaking. Like you wouldn't, use slang in a job interview, for example, but you would with your friends.
Right.
It's just like, wearing a suit to a barbecue wouldn't really fit the situation.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Right?
I like that. The suit and barbecue analogy.
Yeah.
And, they give a good example of how slang can replace a more formal phrase.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of saying, how are you, which can feel a little bit stiff,
right,
you might just say, what's up?
Yeah.
Which immediately makes it more casual and a little bit more friendly, I think.
Definitely.
So they actually go through 5 different slang terms in the episode. So I thought maybe we could dive into those now.
I'm ready.
Okay, great. So first up, we have the word lit. And I think a lot of people have probably heard this one.
Yeah, it's pretty common.
It's not about lamps or anything.
No.
If something is lit, it basically just means it's really exciting or fun.
It's the best thing ever.
Yeah. You could say that party was lit or that concert was lit.
Mm-hmm.
Really anything that's super fun and exciting.
Yeah, and you know what I think is so cool about lit is that it just adds an extra level of emphasis.
Right.
It's not just that something is fun, it's so fun that it's lit.
Totally, yeah.
It's almost on fire with excitement.
Okay, so next up we have salty. Now this one, it's not about food.
No salt and pepper here.
No, not at all. If someone's salty, it means that they are upset about something.
Yeah, they're kind of bitter or holding a grudge.
Right. So you might say something like, he's still salty about losing the game.
Mm-hmm.
Or she's salty because she didn't get invited to the party.
Yeah, and I think salty is a really interesting one because it just captures that feeling of lingering resentment.
Right.
You're just kind of stewing in your own negative emotions.
Yeah, and it's not just a fleeting anger. It's
Right.
more like something that kind of sticks with you.
Yeah, it's like that bitterness that just stays with you for a while.
Okay. Next up, we have GOAT, which is an acronym for greatest of all time.
Yeah, this is a classic.
This is a classic one.
Yeah.
It's really popular in sports.
Yeah.
You might say Michael Jordan is the GOAT of basketball.
Right.
But it's actually kind of expanded to other areas now.
Yeah, for sure. You could say this pizza is the GOAT.
Totally.
Anything that you think is just the absolute best, you can call it the GOAT.
Right. Okay, so next up we have throw shade. Now this one is all about indirect insults.
Yeah, it's like a subtle dig or a sarcastic remark.
Right. So it's not directly saying something mean to someone.
No, it's more like you're implying something negative without actually saying it outright.
Right. For example, someone might say, "Oh, nice outfit. Is that what's in style these days?"
Ouch.
Right. So you're not directly saying that you don't like the outfit.
Right.
But you're definitely implying that it's not fashionable.
Yeah, and you're doing it in a way that's kind of sly and underhanded.
Exactly. Exactly. Okay. And then last but not least, we have no cap, which just means no lie.
Yeah, it's like a way of emphasizing that what you're saying is the truth.
Right. So like you might say, I aced that test, no cap. Or that movie was amazing, no cap.
And I think this one is interesting because it's really taken off in the age of social media.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you see it all over the internet and comment sections on Twitter, everywhere.
Yeah. Thinking back to all the times I've tried to use slang and maybe failed miserably, it makes me realize there's definitely an art to using it well.
Oh, for sure. It's not as easy as it looks.
Right, right. So maybe we should talk about slang etiquette now.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Like, when is it okay to use these terms, and when should you probably just avoid them altogether?
I mean, it's kind of like common sense, right? You wouldn't show up to a job interview wearing sweatpants.
Right.
And in the same way, you wouldn't want to throw around slang in a formal setting.
Okay, so what are some situations where it would be appropriate to use slang?
Well, Marco and Erica talked about this, and they said that slang is generally fine in casual settings. Like when you're hanging out with friends or posting on social media or maybe sending an informal email to someone you know well.
Right, right.
But when it comes to more formal situations like job interviews, professional emails, presentations, that kind of thing, it's probably best to stick to more formal language.
Makes sense.
Yeah, you don't want to risk coming across as unprofessional or disrespectful.
I totally agree. And I think it's also important to, read the room. Right? Like, you can usually tell if a situation calls for more formal language or if it's okay to be a little more casual.
Yeah, definitely. It's all about being aware of your audience and the context of the conversation.
So we've talked about when to use slang, but what are some things that people should avoid doing when they're trying to use slang? Like, what are some common mistakes that people make?
Oh, there are definitely a few pitfalls to watch out for.
Yeah.
One of the biggest ones is overusing slang.
Okay.
Like if you try to cram too much slang into every sentence, it's going to sound really unnatural and forced. It's like wearing too much perfume a little bit can be nice, but too much can be overwhelming.
Yeah, I like that analogy.
It's all about finding that balance.
Right. What else?
Another common mistake is using outdated slang.
Oh, yeah.
Like words and phrases that were popular a few years ago but have since fallen out of fashion.
It's like showing up to a party in last year's outfit.
Exactly. It's just going to make you look out of touch.
So how do you avoid that? Like, how do you know if a slang term is still current or if it's, gone the way of the dinosaur?
Well, one of the best ways is to just pay attention to how people are using language around you.
Okay.
Like, listen to the music that's popular. Watch the latest TV shows and movies. Follow people on social media.
Right.
That's where you're going to hear the most current slang.
And I guess it's also important to, be aware of the fact that slang can vary a lot by region.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Right? Like, a word that has one meaning in the U.S. might have a completely different meaning in the U.K. or Australia.
Exactly. Like Marco and Erica talked about the word pants, for example.
Oh, yeah?
In the UK, pants means underwear, but in the US, it means trousers.
Right. So you can imagine how that could lead to some pretty awkward misunderstandings
For sure.
if you're not careful.
So it's always good to be aware of those regional differences and to double check the meaning of a slang term if you're not sure.
Yeah, that's good advice.
And speaking of good advice, Marco and Erica had some really helpful tips for incorporating slang naturally and confidently into your conversations.
Oh, I'd love to hear those. What did they say?
Well, one of the things they emphasized was the importance of observation.
Okay.
Like paying attention to how native speakers use slang in different contexts and trying to kind of pick up on the nuances of how they use it.
Right.
It's like being a language detective.
I like that. So you're not just memorizing words, you're actually trying to understand how they function in real life conversations. Yeah. And that makes so much sense, right? Because slang is all about the way it's used, the tone of voice, the context.
Yeah, it's not just about the words themselves, it's about the way they're delivered.
And the feeling behind them.
Total.
So it's not something that you can just learn from a textbook.
Right.
You really have to kind of immerse yourself in the language and pay attention to how people are actually using it.
Yeah, and one of the best ways to do that is by watching movies and TV shows.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
It's such a fun and effective way to learn slang because you can see how characters use it in different situations.
Right.
And you can get a feel for the tone and the delivery.
Plus, it's way more enjoyable than just memorizing lists of words.
Totally.
So what other tips did they give?
They also talked about the importance of like surrounding yourself with the language as much as possible.
Yep.
So that could mean listening to music, following native speakers on social media, engaging with online communities where people are using slang, and of course, there's no substitute for real-life conversation.
Right. You got to practice.
Yeah, so the more you can talk to native speakers, the more you'll start to pick up on the nuances of slang and how it's used.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember that learning slang is an ongoing process, right? Like, it's not something that you can just master overnight.
Oh, definitely not.
It takes time and effort and a willingness to kind of step outside of your comfort zone and experiment.
And to be okay with making mistakes,
Right, right.
because that's how we all learn.
But I think the rewards are definitely worth it
Oh, for sure.
because, being able to use slang effectively can really help you to connect with people on a deeper level and to, really understand the nuances of English-speaking cultures.
Yeah, and it just makes your conversations more fun and engaging.
So we've talked about what slang is. We've talked about when to use it, when to avoid it, some common mistakes to avoid. But let's take a step back for a second and think about the bigger picture. Like, why is mastering slang so important? What does it really bring to the table in terms of language learning?
Well, for me, it's about unlocking a deeper level of fluency and cultural understanding.
Okay.
It's about going beyond textbook language and really connecting with the language as it's actually spoken and lived.
It's like cracking a secret code, right? Like you're suddenly able to understand this whole other layer of communication.
Yeah, and you can really start to appreciate the nuances of the culture and how people interact with each other.
And as we've been talking about, language is constantly evolving.
It is.
So slang is like a window into those changes.
Yeah, it reflects the trends, the attitudes, the values of a particular time and place.
So it's not just about sounding cool or trendy.
Right.
It's about understanding the culture and how it's evolving.
Totally.
So let's do a quick recap of what we've learned today.
Yeah.
We talked about what slang is and how it can help you to sound more natural in English. We explored 5 specific slang terms: lit, salty, goat, throw shade, and no cap. We discussed when it's appropriate to use slang and when it's best to avoid it. And we talked about some common mistakes to steer clear of, like overusing slang or using outdated terms.
Yeah.
And finally, we shared some practical tips for practicing and incorporating slang into your everyday English conversations.
Hopefully our listeners are feeling a little more confident about using slang now.
Yeah, I hope so too. Now, I have a question for you, our listener. What other strategies might you use to learn and confidently use slang in your own English conversations? Have you had any, funny or embarrassing experiences with slang? We'd love to hear your stories.
Yeah, tell us about it. We're all ears.
Because, this whole deep dive has really shown us just how dynamic and engaging language can be.
It really has.
It's a journey of constant discovery, isn't it?
Absolutely. And we're excited to see what new slang terms we'll uncover in our next deep dive.
Until then, happy slanging.
Keep it lit.
Oh, there you go. All right.
Yeah, right. It really is. And what's interesting is mastering slang isn't just about expanding your vocabulary.
Right.
It's also about developing a deeper understanding of cultural nuances and social dynamics.
Oh, that's such a good point. So it's like you're not just learning words, you're learning like how to navigate the unspoken rules of communication in a particular culture.
Yeah.
Which can be tricky, right?
Totally. Especially, with a language like English that has so many regional variations and subcultures.
Yeah, for sure.
So you really have to be, mindful of the context in which you're using slang.
Right.
Because what might be perfectly acceptable in one setting could be, totally inappropriate in another.
Exactly. Like you probably wouldn't use slang terms like lit or salty in a formal business meeting.
Right.
But it might be totally fine if you're, hanging out with friends at a bar or something.
Exactly. It's all about reading the room and adapting your language to fit the situation. And speaking of fitting in, have you ever noticed how slang can sometimes be used to, signal belonging to a particular group or community?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like a secret code that only insiders understand.
Yeah.
And that can be really powerful, especially for young people, who are trying to find their place in the world.
Think about it. Teenagers often have their own unique slang that sets them apart from adults and helps them to create a sense of identity and shared experience.
Mm-hmm.
It's a way of bonding with their peers and establishing their own, cultural space.
That makes so much sense. It's like they're creating their own dialect, their own way of expressing themselves that reflects their their values and experiences. So
Yeah.
by learning the slang of a particular group, you're essentially gaining access to their world,
Right.
their way of thinking and interacting with each other.
It's like a key that unlocks a whole new level of cultural understanding.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that analogy. It's like you're not just like scratching the surface. You're really getting into the nitty-gritty of how people communicate.
Exactly.
Okay. So we've talked about like the social and cultural aspects of slang, but let's get back to like the practical side of things for a minute. Marco and Erica, they shared some really helpful tips for incorporating slang naturally into your everyday English conversations.
I did, yeah. They had some good ones.
So what were some of the things that they emphasized?
Well, one of the most important things they talked about was the importance of observation.
Okay.
Like really paying attention to how native speakers use slang in different contexts.
So it's almost like you have to become a slang detective.
Exactly. You're listening carefully, you're noticing patterns, and you're trying to figure out the subtle nuances of how slang is used in different situations.
So you're not just memorizing words, you're actually trying to understand like how they function in real life conversations.
Yeah, and the more you observe, the more you'll start to like develop an intuitive sense of what sounds natural and appropriate in different contexts.
Right, and I think that's something that's really hard to teach, right?
Yeah.
It's something that you have to kind of like pick up through experience and by paying attention.
And it's like learning to dance.
Oh, okay.
You need to watch how others move before you can really find your own rhythm.
And speaking of rhythm, I think it's important to point out that slang can also add like a certain musicality to language.
Oh, yeah, totally. Like it can make your speech sound more dynamic and engaging.
Yeah, more like a natural flow of conversation rather than a stiff recitation of words.
Exactly. Slang often uses like rhythm and rhyme and wordplay
Right.
in a way that, really adds a layer of creativity and expression to language.
Like instead of just saying someone's happy,
Yeah,
you could say they're, happy as a clam.
exactly. Or tickled pink.
Or on cloud nine.
Right.
Right. So you're not just conveying information, you're kind of painting a picture with words.
Yeah, and you're creating a sense of like playful energy.
It's like you're adding a little spice to your conversations.
Totally. And I think that's one of the things that makes slang so appealing.
Yeah.
It lets you play with language to be, creative and expressive in a way that more formal language sometimes restricts.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that's a really important point to remember, especially for people who are learning English as a second language.
Yeah.
Like, don't be afraid to experiment with slang.
Right.
To try it out in different situations and see what works for you.
Yeah, you don't have to be perfect.
Right.
Just have fun with it.
So we've talked about the importance of observation,
Mhm.
but what are some other like practical ways that people can incorporate slang into their everyday English conversations?
Well, one of the most effective ways is to just, immerse yourself in environments where slang is commonly used.
Okay, so you're talking about like hanging out with native English speakers,
Yeah.
watching movies and TV shows, listening to music, engaging in online communities.
Exactly. The more you surround yourself with the language, the more it will start to kind of like seep into your subconscious and become part of your natural vocabulary.
It's like learning to swim by jumping into the deep end of the pool.
Right. You might struggle at first,
Yeah,
but eventually you'll start to get the hang of it.
you'll figure it out.
And remember, learning slang is an ongoing process.
Like it's not a one-time thing.
It takes time and effort and a willingness to step outside of your comfort zone
Yeah.
and to be okay with making mistakes along the way.
But I think the rewards are definitely worth it
Totally.
because, being able to use slang effectively can make your conversations more engaging, more expressive, more authentic.
Yeah, it can help you to connect with people on a deeper level and to, really understand the nuances of English-speaking cultures.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like you're not just speaking the language, you're living it.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today, but before we wrap things up, I want to touch on one more important point that Marco and Erica brought up.
Okay, what's that?
They talked about the importance of being respectful when you're using slang,
Yeah.
especially when you're interacting with people from different cultures or backgrounds.
Oh, that's such a crucial point.
Right.
Because, slang can be a powerful tool for building connections, but it can also be misused in a way that creates barriers or even causes offense.
Exactly. And I think it's important to be mindful of the fact that not everyone uh, understands or appreciates slang in the same way.
Right.
What might be considered funny or endearing in one context could be perceived as, rude or disrespectful in another.
And this is where that idea of observation that we talked about earlier really comes into play.
Okay.
Pay attention to how people react when you use slang.
Mm.
If they seem uncomfortable or confused, it's probably a sign that you need to, adjust your language.
Right. It's all about being sensitive to the social dynamics of the situation and using slang in a way that promotes understanding and connection rather than division or misunderstanding.
Exactly.
And I think, if you're ever unsure about whether a particular slang term is appropriate,
Yeah.
it's always best to err on the side of caution.
Yeah.
You can always ask a trusted friend or a language partner for advice or just avoid using the term altogether.
Yeah. Better safe than sorry.
Okay, so we've talked about the importance of being respectful when you're using slang. What are some other things to keep in mind as you continue your journey of slang exploration?
Well, one thing to remember is that slang is constantly evolving. What's considered cool today might be outdated tomorrow.
That's fashion, right?
Exactly. Like what's trendy one season might be totally out of style the next.
So how do you stay on top of the ever-changing world of slang?
Well, one of the best ways is to just, immerse yourself in popular culture.
Okay.
Pay attention to the language that's being used in movies, TV shows, music, social media.
Yeah, keep your ears open.
Yeah, exactly. And you can also, follow language blogs and online communities where people are discussing slang and its evolution.
Well, it sounds like it's all about, being a lifelong learner.
Yeah.
Constantly expanding your vocabulary and adapting to the ever-changing nuances of language.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that makes language learning so fascinating. It's a journey of constant discovery and growth.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today, but I think it's time to bring this deep dive to a close. So what are some key takeaways that our listener can walk away with?
Well, I think one of the most important things to remember is that slang is a powerful tool for connecting with people and cultures on a deeper level.
Right.
It's about going beyond textbook language and embracing the living, breathing language that's spoken in everyday life.
And while it's important to be mindful of the context and to use slang respectfully, don't be afraid to experiment and have fun with it.
Exactly. Language is all about expression and connection.
So go out there, explore the world of slang, and find your own unique voice.
Yeah, it's really amazing how something as simple as slang can really open up a whole new world of understanding.
It really is, yeah. It's like you're gaining access to like a secret language, a way of speaking that, reveals not just the words themselves, but the culture and the history behind them.
And it's constantly changing too, which makes it even more fascinating.
Right. Like you're always learning, you're always discovering new ways of expressing yourself and connecting with others. I think that's one of the most exciting things about language in general is it's never static.
Right.
It's always evolving and adapting to the world around it.
Absolutely. And slang is a perfect reflection of that, that dynamism. It's like a linguistic snapshot of a particular time and place.
Right.
Capturing the trends, the attitudes, the values of a specific culture.
Yeah. So, as you're learning English or really any language, don't just focus on like the formal grammar and vocabulary.
Right.
Pay attention to the slang, the idioms, the everyday expressions that give the language its flavor and its personality. It's those little details that can really make your conversations come alive and help you to connect with people on a deeper level.
That's a great point. It's like the difference between reading a recipe and actually tasting the dish.
Oh, okay.
Right. The recipe gives you the basic ingredients, but it's the spices, the herbs, the little touches that really bring the flavors to life.
Totally, yeah. And slang is like those spices and herbs.
Yeah.
It adds depth, complexity, richness to your language.
Oh, totally.
It helps you to express yourself in a way that's both authentic and engaging.
And one of the things I love about about slang is that it often uses humor and wordplay in such creative ways. It's like a playground for language
Okay.
where you can, experiment and have fun with words without being afraid to break the
I
rules.
love that. So you're giving yourself permission to be playful, to be expressive, to let your personality shine through in your language.
Exactly, exactly. And that playfulness, that willingness to experiment is what keeps language fresh and vibrant.
Right.
It's what allows it to evolve and adapt to the ever-changing world around us. So, don't be afraid to embrace that playfulness in your own language learning journey.
So, to kind of wrap things up, let's go back to the 5 slang terms that we explored today. Lit, salty, goat, throw shade, and no cap.
Yeah, good ones.
Right. These are just, a small sampling of the vast and ever-expanding world of English slang.
Yeah, it's just the tip of the iceberg.
Right, right. And as we've discussed, mastering slang isn't just about memorizing definitions. It's about understanding the cultural context, the social dynamics, the subtle nuances of how these words are used in everyday conversations.
It really is.
And it's about, developing an ear for the rhythm and flow of language and being able to use slang in a way that feels, natural and authentic and appropriate for the situation.
It's about finding your voice.
Right. And most importantly, it's about having fun with language. Don't be afraid to, experiment, try new things, and, find your own unique voice.
Yeah, make it your own.
So there you have it, your crash course in English slang. We hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of informal language.
You did.
And that you gained some valuable insights that you can apply to your own language learning journey.
Definitely.
And remember, the journey doesn't end here.
It doesn't.
The world of slang is constantly evolving, so keep your ears open, stay curious, and never stop exploring.
Absolutely.
Who knows what, awesome new slang words we'll be decoding in our next deep dive.
I can't wait to find out.
Yeah. Until then, keep those conversations flowing, and don't be afraid to sprinkle in a little slang magic.
Let's go.
All right, that's it for today. Thanks for joining us.
See you next time.